A quick disclaimer before we start. YouTube is not okay with talking about specific adult topics or using specific words in videos on their platform. Unfortunately, in order to get this video to be acceptable for YouTube's terms of service, I will be censoring some words when they come up. A slightly blurred version of the word will be put on the screen if you can't make out the word I'm trying to say. This story is incredibly disturbing and has an unimaginable amount of graphic content. Content warnings will be shown on the screen now. Thank you. Lily Orchard is a media analyst on YouTube with over 130,000 subscribers as of writing this script. Starting her channel back in March 2009, her popularity began to grow from the Brony community, later publishing viral videos such as The Legend of Korra's Garbage and Here's Why and Steven Universe's Garbage and Here's Why helped with that as well. With all this in mind, it's safe to say she has a rather sizable audience. However, many people in said audience are unaware in her past fanfiction writings. Oh, she writes them now. Some of her stories being Scars, The Sith Resurgence, and her Pokemon webcomic Poke Madhouse. But I'm talking about something different. I'm talking about a fanfiction in which she has gone out of her way to hide and has actively gaslighted multiple people about its existence, including her own audience. Before any of you go, I want to talk about what I'm going to be doing in this video. I will provide examples of Lily's behavior when this topic gets brought up, give a very small summary of the contents in the fanfiction, prove she actually wrote it, debunk common misconceptions, and go into detail about the actual contents of the fanfiction. One last disclaimer, she has gone by multiple usernames, so a few of the screenshots might have different usernames attached to them, some of which she still uses to this day. Regardless of your feelings about her, please use Lily Orchard when referring to her in the comments section. The list of usernames are Lily Orchard, Lily Pete, Jerry Pete, Valkyr Studios, and Ballspawn. Regardless of the other proof I have, she's recently put all of her past usernames in the tags. You can check it out for yourself. Lily not only has said that people have been lying about her making this fanfic, but has gone as far as to say that people are doctoring evidence and wrote an entire fanfic just to defame and harass her. She's gone on multiple occasions saying that the people criticizing her for this want her to take her own life. Instances of her saying this are in this post, and this post. The story that was being spread was a fanfiction Lily and her friend Nintendo Gal wrote called Stockholm, which started in February of 2014. She in the past tried to pretend that she didn't even know what Stockholm was.
The forgiveness of John, completing his transformation into a cat boy. Heat death related lasagna extinction. Lasagna overdose reading Stockholm. How do you read a city?
By the way, that doesn't make any sense. You can't deny doing something one minute and then act like you never heard of it the next minute. However, nowadays, she's outright denying she wrote it. Stockholm is an extremely disturbing story about adult, domestic, and murder. And the worst part is that all of these things are either seen as good, aspirational, forgivable, sexually appealing, or tragic for the abusers involved. I must repeat this. Stockholm is not some horror story that paints these horrible people as bad, but as sympathetic characters that the audience is supposed to support, relate to, and even find sexually appealing. Now, I know that some of you might be rolling your eyes and saying, "It's just a fanfiction. Why do you care? They're just words on a screen." As much as I personally disagree with that assertion, it doesn't really matter, because Lily also disagrees with you. She's gone on record saying that fanfictions involving these things are child pornography, and that there is no difference between fictional child pornography and real-life child pornography. By Lily's own logic, she is a pedophile and a child pornographer. But before we can get into that, allow me to provide proof that Lily actually wrote this. Firstly, we have to look at the co-writer of the story, Nintendo Gal. It is public knowledge that they are, or at least were, friends. This is confirmed by the multiple posts from Nintendo Gal's blog. Not to mention an audio recording they did.
Auntie Cassie, what is the Raptor squad of weird names?
Well, Billy, it's actually because the names of Charlie, Delta, and Echo come from alphabet NATO codes. And because Owen was in the Navy, it makes sense that he used these kind of names.
But what about Blue? That doesn't sound like a code name.
That was never explained. But one theory I have is that he was originally going to name her Beta, but decided to name her Blue instead because of her stripes.
Oh, okay. Hey, wait a second, why would he name her Beta?
Because she's the beta of the pack.
Then who's the Alpha?
Owen's the alpha.
You ship it, don't you?
Why does everyone keep saying that?
A reference to Nintendo Gal in one of her videos.
Lemon Chiffon even appears later to make one of those god-awful brainless criticisms about Fluttershy being impossible to relate to, while a pony wearing Fluttershy merchandise slinks away in shame. Which is weird because I'm very good friends with someone who loves Fluttershy and thinks Fluttershy is totally relatable, and whenever I criticized the character, she never crawled away in shame. She whipped out the sock'em boppers and yelled, "I didn't start this war, but it's on!"
And a cameo in her Pokemon comic. But isn't it possible that Nintendo Gal was the one who added all the disturbing content? In some way, I'm sure it's possible, but that would be a small amount considering Lily has gone on record saying she was the one who convinced Nintendo Gal to add most of the disturbing content in the story.
How the hell are you going to keep Flutterdash out of a story you're writing with Nintendo Gal 55?
You're talking to the guy who managed to convince her that writing Twilight as a rapist and Rainbow as a pedophile would have been a good idea. I think I can manage this.
Not only that, but Nintendo Gal has made a ton of posts talking about how many of those scenes made her uncomfortable.
Who's your favorite character to write in Stockholm? A broken bar. Well, in spite of certain elements I'm either uncomfortable with or ignorant about, I'd say almost everyone. They've all been good to write in some ways. Twilight was certainly difficult, but there were good times with her too. All the main 6 I've been, again, despite some uncomfortable bumps in the road, have been joys to write. Sonata certainly is up there, too. I've always liked her character, and so it was fun to be able to flesh her out further and play off of Adagio, and later Aria and or Sunset, like she has.
What's your fave story in the Stockholm series?
I would have to say it's the Razzle Dazzle, with the Dash family being a close second. They were vast improvements from Stockholm's original run, and I'm so glad we've had the chance to dabble with a series like this. It's helped me appreciate the universe we've set a lot more, and it's been more fun. The Razzle Dazzle has especially been a fantastic ride. I have loved every second of it. Even in the tougher moments, it's still hilariously fun how we took a sadistic monster like Adagio Dazzle and turned her into a loving, caring, generous and very sure-footed motherly figure. I didn't feel like she was an Uck with her name attached to it. It felt like Adagio with an alternative character interpretation. I've pretty much said several times, I want to work for her. Sign me up.
What I mean to say is, to someone who doesn't really like writing really dark themes, how did Jerry get you to write Stockholm?
It helped having the characters in there, the comedic moments and all of the softer scenes to follow. XP plus it was also my trying to stretch my creative muscles, and trying to find ways to overcome the issues presented in the story. I like dark themes when they're used well. I want to be able to write dark themes in a good way, as I sometimes have dark ideas in mind, but overall, it just kind of evolved that way.
Are you nervous about what the reception of Stockholm might be?
In all honesty, yes. I will put warnings, a lot of them, and make sure the readers know what they're in for. While I am admittedly somewhat miffed that a certain someone put the story on the TV tropes page without consulting me, I guess it kind of helps. Now the readers know what to expect, for the most part, and won't be walking into a huge surprise. I'm even going to post about it on my blog on Fanfiction, because, really, I don't want to tread these waters lightly. If worse comes to worse, it'll be taken down, because really, if I saw this story from a reader standpoint, I'd avoid it completely. But it's almost done, just a ways left to go. We'll see what happens.
She later went on to describe how she wouldn't write those things again, and that Lily helped her through writing these scenes. There were some scenes that had to be cut out because Nintendo Gal couldn't mentally handle it anymore. This was due to the severity of the subject material.
Were there any ideas in Stockholm that you guys ended up scraping?
Tilde okay. This other one was for a shot we currently haven't released yet. Without going into too much details, it involved the CMC and it was so awful. I would read all of my original fanfics from 10 years ago then ever write or read that again. I didn't just hate how the scene became, I felt physically uncomfortable reading it and writing it. It wasn't just uncomfortable, it was painful. All throughout Stockholm, the worst I ever felt was sad. Now sad, I can handle that perfectly fine. Even the descriptions of the domestic abuse, while unnerving, weren't graphically written and didn't affect me that badly. Yes, Essentia terrified me in the story, but I can also handle fear. But physical discomfort from reading something so terribly uncomfortable and painful? No way. I was, honestly, on the verge of tears. Thankfully, Pawn understood and offered that we make it less a broken bar like that. It turned out so much better after that. I am forever thankful for his compassion and letting us redo that scene. Tilde another was actually something requested of us to do. The aftermath of Twilight's of Essentia and the entire forgiveness element. Now, the scene itself that the reader had in mind wasn't a bad idea. I liked it. I would have been more than happy to do it, and it would have been easy for me. However, it was the stuff needed to lead up to it. The actual scene, graphically done. A broken bar just said one big nope. And outright refused to do it. No, he didn't force me or anything like that. He even told the reader he was not making any promises. I'm thankful he understood where I was coming from and didn't push me on it, even admitting he couldn't do it, either. The thing is, I can't write scenes. I knew it would have made me pained and uncomfortable. Beyond that, it was also some time after we'd written the aforementioned scene. It didn't even take place in that scene and I felt completely uncomfortable and pained. What makes you think I would have been able to handle malicious especially between characters I liked, especially with a pairing I liked? You may as well have asked me to write Rainbow Fluttershy. So, no way, we didn't do it. The same reason we couldn't have Twilight graphically beating Essentia, we weren't able to bring ourselves to do it.
On top of the fact that she is not into Fulcon/Lolicon.
What do you think of Fulcon? It's out of curiosity, considering you never actually brought it up.
I personally don't view it, to be honest. And I just never think about it. It never came up. The thing is, though, I can see why people don't like it and would even be against writing it. We equate it with pedophilia, which is a little something called illegal, in most places, anyway. But even so, it's just not something I could ever write or willingly read. It's still, to me, an adult and a child. That's a personal no-no for me. If other people like it, that's fine. It's not exactly illegal as child pornography, but it's not for me. That's all it is. Aged up children characters, I can go with that. At least there's some kind of thought, as it also leads to interesting character possibilities and writing them from a different perspective. Now, on another end of the spectrum, if it's two kids involved with one another, I don't usually mind that at all. Kids do, in some ways, get into that sort of thing with one another as a curious exploration of the human body, even if they don't exactly realize it, and that's fine. That usually is just basic discoveries and meant to be as such. So, if you do write/read/like Falcon, I'm not about to tell you you're wrong for liking it. Not at all. It's the same thing I say about people who are attracted to children in real life. Unless they are physically harming and molesting them, there's nothing wrong. We can't help how we feel and who we're attracted to. All we can control is what we do about it.
But even if Lily didn't add any of the disturbing content to the story, she still collaborated on a creation of what she herself considers to be child pornography, and has not apologized or even properly addressed it. In fact, she has done the opposite. Lily has outright stated her making of Stockholm in multiple posts and videos. Here is Lily admitting that she wrote Stockholm and that the criticisms of it is in bad faith because of her politics.
I don't get why some people think Stockholm is this horrific, evil story. Yeah, it has weird relationships in it, but nobody ever really defends them. They just exist.
They think it's horrific because I wrote it. The people who were freaking out about it were people who already had me on their shit list for being a leftist trans woman, and they'll take anything that even vaguely looks like it might help them keep their hate boners turgid. Old, Well-known works like Sweet Apple Massacre or Ask Princess Milicia are worse in terms of content than Stockholm was. Pretty much everything written by Headless Rainbow is My Little Pony plus a Serbian film, but you don't see any of them stalking that guy. And chances are if you presented those works to these people, they'd make some excuse as to why Equestria Girls plus Family Guy was worse in every possible way. It's not about the content of those works, it's about finding excuses to continue stalking me for being an evil SJW.
And in this infamous Tumblr post, she talks about how she ships two real-life people, one of them being underage at the time, and another being an adult. She uses Stockholm as a reason of why people shouldn't have a problem with it. Not only that, but she straight up says, I wrote a book where a 15-year-old ran off with a 38-year-old and you all thought it was lovely.
Why do you ship Fire Rose so hard, anyway?
You want the real reason or the funny reason? Screw it, I'll give you both. Funny reason: young Republicans who embody the kind-hearted nature that genuine family values are supposed to embody and are the spitting image of that homey American family with very few of the modern drawbacks. They are likely the very last of their kind. I'm pretty sure there are zoologists out there who are legally obligated to try and get them to breed. Real reason: the two of them have the exact same values, the exact same traditions, and the exact same virtues and vices. That's not just a silly ship. I actually said to Josh that he and Ink Rose were practically made for each other, and if this ship becomes canon, I will have the most smug I told you so face in the history of smug I told you so faces. But she's underage, she won't be for very long. Also, I wrote a book where a 15-year-old ran off with a 38-year-old and you all thought it was lovely. So let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Is conked on the head by a rock. Ow, damn it, Josh.
There's also Allie the Alicorn, a Tumblr user that seemed to be a really big fan of Stockholm when Lily was still talking about it. Anytime that she would post about it, or get questions about Stockholm, Allie would reblog or talk to Lily about it in the comments. How Tumblr works is, if you reblog something, it's going to stay on your blog forever unless you delete it, regardless of if the original poster deletes it, meaning there is a large amount of verifiable proof that Lily wrote Stockholm and is lying about it. You can go on their blog today and see that Lily's username is objectively the one who is talking about Stockholm. There is no editing, there was no web manipulation. It is absolutely Lily. But even if Allie the Alicorn sees this video and decides to delete everything, I have everything archived. Even if these aren't enough for you, there are multiple clips of Lily admitting to it. In the now deleted video, Glass of Water, the grandmother of Grimdark, Lily is talking about her desire to cover Grimdark fanfiction for Halloween. In doing so, she lists off potential stories and admits she wrote Stockholm.
When I started this series, I had every intention on doing something special for Halloween, and nothing could be better than taking a truly bizarre and messed up fanfic and picking through it like an amphetamine-fueled chimp. But which one? There's so many. Fallout Equestria? That's too long. Fall of Equestria? F*** no. Equestrian Pony Meat Business? I think I'll break my rating limits. Can't do Stockholm, I wrote that one. But then I thought...
The next video is Mommy Dagio equals Alicorn. The meaning behind it is that in Stockholm, she takes an already established character from the Equestria Girls movies and rewrites her personality. In Stockholm, the character is Adagio Dazzle and is called Mommy by multiple of her partners. The title is in reference to that. Many in the Brony community would see that as being objectionable, similar to how many in said community didn't like it when others had Alicorn or overpowered original characters. The entire video is about how making these seemingly overpowered characters isn't inherently bad and that it all comes down to the writing, meaning Adagio as a motherly figure is the equivalent of having an overpowered character. As an example of how to do this correctly, she uses Stockholm multiple times.
It's because of this that I end up with the most infuriating question ever put into my inbox. As a writer of both original fiction and fanfiction, I have a habit of always using OCs. I can't really say I've written a single story in my life that didn't have an OC in it somewhere. I created a character that ended up being paired with Twilight, still wasn't called a Mary Sue. There's an alternate version of her that's a bigger boobie than Fluttershy, still wasn't called a Mary Sue. Even when I was deliberately and knowingly pushing the goddamn buttons, still couldn't get the readers to spew the phrase. You need readers that are going to ask you the questions that get you thinking more deeply. You need readers who are willing to invest their attention as much as you are willing to invest your time. If I can take this brutal sadist and write her as a loving matriarch that rivals Fluttershy when it comes to sincere kindness, I'm pretty sure you can make an alicorn. You can make a good story out of anything. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have more Mommy Daggio to write.
Here she lists off all of her original characters in Stockholm.
Why do you have so much distaste for fanon characters? Mostly because the fandom has some of the least interesting character ideas you can think of. I mean, just look at the names. Dr. Hooves, Derpy Hooves. Careful guys, don't overexert yourselves now. I think perhaps the worst was Vinyl's initial fandom name, DJ Pone 3. That's just DJ Pony spelled poorly. Say what you like about the names I come up with, at least they're goofy in fascinating ways.
Here's Lily referring to how much time she spent writing Adagio Dazzle as a predator.
Reforming Adagio would be to make Adagio nice, and nice Adagio isn't fun. Adagio was fun specifically because she was a predator, and you can't combine nice and predator. Well, okay, you can, but doing so would require the writers to contend with the fact that they spent the last 4 years encouraging children to talk to strangers, and we all know they're not going to do that.
I think the most damning one is where she, her ex-wife, and her friend Zane outwardly talk about her process in making Stockholm. Due to copyright, I'll be cutting this down. I've done this with the other clips as well. The full clips will be in the description. And Lily, if you copyright strike this video, you're implicitly admitting that you said these things and that you wrote Stockholm.
Like the stuff that happens with Elethin and the thing we're writing?
Yeah.
It's about, well, I mean, I've been that way too. I mean, I do a lot of experimenting with my characters with Nintendo Gal, and there's a lot of stuff where we'll write a scene and we'll finish it and I'll look back on it later and just like, this doesn't really work for this character. And I end up not using the scene, but I'm glad I wrote it.
True.
But like nearly every character goes that way. It's like, what if, and then I give a weird, offbeat, often extremely problematic idea, and then I just go from there. Like Stockholm Azzy was on the basis of, what if there was an abuse victim who was so absurdly stubborn they were determined to make their spouse better? And then I went from there. It was problematic as but goddamn, it was fun to write. The second was Spectra in Stockholm, who was Fluttershy and Rainbow Dash's, well, initially Fluttershy and Rainbow Dash's son. And then when me and Nintendo Gal decided we wanted to try writing a transgender character, we decided that Spectrum was the best choice, and so Spectrum became Spectra. It wasn't really well designed. It wasn't really well done. We didn't cover a whole lot of interesting ground with it. They were set in a very progressive universe, so it was just. She got her hormones, she got everything squared away, she started transitioning, and shortly afterward, this was the most interesting thing we did. It was shortly afterward her name was officially changed. She got her new name almost around the same time she started transitioning, but the narration still kept calling her Spectrum and referring to her with male pronouns until there was a point in the story, I can't remember exactly which, but something really spurned Spectra forward, and then the narration changed along with it. But ultimately, it didn't really turn out very well because, it was the first character we'd done. And we actually discussed that if we were to rewrite Stockholm, we would use another character for this. Because ultimately, Spectrum being a very willowy feminine boy was just a lot more interesting. And having Spectrum be the one who turned out to be transgender was, in my opinion, just too cliche, and I'd rather do it with someone who has to have a bit more of an internal struggle with it. Because Spectrum was always so girly that it just kind of felt like a no-brainer, and I'd honestly like to have a character have like their own internal struggle with that idea, like I did. The interesting thing about Stockholm is that it's actually the Equestria depicted in Stockholm is trigendered, where you have men, women, and intersex women. And I always thought we never really did as many interesting things with that concept as we could have. I mean, that was like the big difference there. That was the interesting thing we had, and we never really did anything with that. And that's kind of something I've always been just kind of kicking myself for. So I think if we were to go back and redo Stockholm, we would explore that idea a little more.
Sounds like fun.
But Spectra was probably the one time where instead of doing something interesting, we started with something interesting and moved to something that was more cliche, and that's always been kind of something I've been kicking myself for ever since.
Also, with these clips in particular, I suggest that you just watch the entire thing. Again, it'll be in the description, as Lily goes in depth on how Stockholm was written. Lily has brought up Stockholm since then, but the context is very much so different. We'll get to that when we can, but in the meantime, let's talk about Stockholm as a piece of art. Lily wrote Stockholm. There isn't really getting around that. Not only did she write it, but she's made a huge effort to hide and lie about it. But besides my somewhat vague description, what is Stockholm in actuality? Well, that's a complicated question. Which one? I've met people who knew of Stockholm and actually read some of it, but who aren't aware that there are multiple of them. Even the people who do know that there are multiple of them don't know how many there are. There are 9 Stockholm books, most of them incomplete. I'll list them off for you now. First off, we have the original Stockholm. It is tagged as complete and is 23 chapters long. Then we have Stockholm Twicentia. This is also complete and is 8 chapters long. Stockholm Valentine's Day is complete with 1 chapter. The next 2 are strange. I'm not sure if this was an issue with archiving or if Lily wanted to rewrite it, but there are 2 stories entitled Limits. They have the same cover art, description, and are both incomplete. However, the contents and lengths are different for both of them. For simplicity, I'll call them Limits 1 and Limits 2. Limits 1 is incomplete with 7 chapters, and Limits 2 is incomplete with 3. Then we have Stockholm, the Dash family. Probably the most disturbing one out of all of them, but another comes close. It is incomplete at 58 chapters. Stockholm the Razzle Dazzle is also heavily disturbing, even for the series. It is complete with 39 chapters. Stockholm the Littlest Dazzle is tagged as on hiatus and stands at 8 chapters. I wonder when it'll come off hiatus. Lastly, we have Stockholm Illicit Disco, which is marked as cancelled and only has 11 chapters. Overall, we have 158 chapters and 728,789 words. This is not accounting for the various side stories that are on Lily's blog that have been either deleted, lost to time, or archived. I read every single chapter, every single word, every single inappropriate scene, and wrote down a TLDR of everything that happens in this hellfic. So, let's get into that. Okay, so we have Rainbow Dash and Fluttershy, and they both got their own set of problems. You see, Fluttershy is dating her friend's brother, Big Mac. He's a sweet guy, and there isn't anything bad going on, but she's bored and unsatisfied in the relationship. And we have Rainbow Dash, who has a little secret in her pants. Also worth mentioning is that she is attracted to children, specifically young teens, which Fluttershy takes surprisingly well. On finding out that Rainbow Dash is packing, she starts cheating on her boyfriend and gets into a secret relationship with Rainbow Dash. Fluttershy's whole arc is accepting that she isn't a bad person for cheating on Big Mac, and that she loves being with Rainbow Dash despite her wanting to kids. Rainbow Dash is a horny bastard. Because of her being intersex, she has a heightened libido, which leads to her wanting to little girls. I'm pretty sure this isn't true for intersex people, and it's kinda messed up that you'd write them like that, Lily. She's even been criticized for it.
As an intersex person, I don't like how Stockholm pretty much states that intersex people can't control their hormones and jump on kids.
You know what? I actually caught that implication while we were writing it, but it was so far into the story there wasn't much that could be done about it. In fact, I actually put this story contains an incorrect depiction of an intersex person in the description for both docs and fanfiction. It was a bit of pseudo hand-waving to separate Rainbow from most others with her particular kind of problem. It was in no way meant to be some sort of commentary on actual intersex people. We probably got post-traumatic stress disorder wrong as well. It's an unfortunate implication, but not an intentional one, and I apologize for that.
This is also funny because this once again proves that Lily wrote Stockholm. Nearly every scene with her is her either wanting to thinking about f***ing or feeling bad that she wants to f*** illegal things. This is particularly annoying because she's basically the main character for a good chunk of the Stockholm series. So, most of the runtime is full of highly disturbing scenes and discussions. She's so obsessed with sex and children that she starts to go crazy and develop voices in her head. We'll get to them later because they become a fully fledged character, but needless to say, it's gross as hell. Typically, Rainbow Dash has a sense of guilt or hesitancy for her more extreme desires, but the voices in her head are unapologetically awful. They ramble on and on about how much they love incest and little girls and rape and just... ugh! It's unbearable at times. Her libido basically consumes her, having her fuck a young girl when she was in college, molesting her adopted daughter Scootaloo in a fit of rage, nearly fucking a 14-year-old Sweetie Belle, having sex with and dating a 12-year-old version of herself, I'll promise I'll get to that later, having sex with her 16-year-old son multiple times, having hardcore and in-depth fantasies about kids that she perceives as almost real, and generally not being able to keep it in her pants when teenage girls are around. After touching Scootaloo and nearly f***ing Sweetie Belle, she is sent to an insane asylum/mental hospital for multiple years, and this is where the voices in her head get a bit more complicated. I think that we should be introduced to Lily's first original character in the story, CL. While in the asylum, Rainbow Dash becomes so lonely and in need of companionship that she starts to talk with the voices in her head. At first it's merely simple conversation, but she begins to visualize a human person. Think of it as a tulpa, if you know what that is. Anyway, this girl looks like Rainbow Dash, except she's 12 years old.
5 a.m. editor's note. I was wrong. She's not 12 years old, she's 10 years old. Great.
And has huge tits. Which, by the way, isn't a free pass for you to be disgusting. She outright confesses she's 12 because that's how old Rainbow Dash was when CL was formed in her head. She doesn't age and will be a 12-year-old forever. Rainbow Dash doesn't care, but this evolves into something more. Rainbow Dash can do more than just see her, she can feel her. When they eventually have it feels real, and CL's juices are even left behind on Rainbow Dash's member. No one else can see her except for Rainbow Dash, but even that begins to be untrue as CL interacts with objects around her, which others can perceive. With some time, she ultimately becomes real and everyone else can see and interact with her. Basically, the voices in Rainbow Dash's head morph into a real person and becomes her forever child bride. Her main purpose in the story is to make intensely disturbing sex jokes and initiate sex with others. Her character arc basically ends with her dyeing her hair purple and becoming an adult actress. Meanwhile, we transition into having a second main character, that being Twilight and her wife Essentia. They don't have a typical relationship. You see, Twilight likes to and beat the shit out of her wife. Essentia is covered in scars, often wearing bandages and casts, and isn't even called by her own name. She's called Kitten, and is considered Twilight's pet. The reason Twilight does this is because she is a princess, and she's under a lot of stress. And also because her mom touched her as a kid. Nice job demonizing victims of abuse, Lily. Because of her being a princess, it's common knowledge from the media that Twilight abuses her wife. But despite the countless reports to the authorities, no one can do anything because Essentia refuses to file charges. She even beats Essentia in front of all of her friends, and when they call the police, they say, This is the 12th time this month, and hang up on them because they can't do anything about it. Twilight is a destructive character, and her whole arc is to non-religiously repent for what she did to her wife, and she eventually becomes a simpering mess. Twilight is sent to the same asylum Rainbow Dash was sent to a few years ago. Before this, however, Essentia and Twilight had a baby. They end up rekindling their relationship after Essentia visits Twilight to let them see their baby. Keep in mind, Twilight beat their infant child once before. Let me repeat, she beat a baby, and we're supposed to feel bad for her. Essentia ignores this and allows her to see the baby anyway, and falls in love with her all over again. After a scene of Twilight getting molested by her own mother, they leave the mental asylum. Twilight becomes very protective of her wife, hurts herself because of the guilt, and overall becomes an ooh tragic character. And speaking of Essentia, her main story is about her trying to make Twilight a better person and to stop hurting her and their child. Most of the cast sees her as this hot, buff woman with a degrading kink. She was winding up to be the least evil person in the cast until towards the end of the story where she makes out and touches her 16-year-old daughter and then takes her own life out of nowhere. I say out of nowhere because Essentia and Twilight's relationship was normal, happy, and wholesome, at least according to the book. There was a spontaneous time lapse in the middle of the story, and it turns out that Twilight started beating Essentia again. The marriage between them is seen as this fragile and rocky thing, but it's beautiful and wholesome, and we'll get through it together, baby. It's weird. I honestly think this was some kind of cop-out after Lily got criticism for writing a sympathetic relationship. She on multiple occasions tried to frame Stockholm as My Little Pony Family Guy or something. I don't know. I assume that after getting a lot of criticism for the abusive relationships, the sympathetic characters, the horrible way that intersex people are treated in the story, and, the pedophilia, Lily started to rewrite it a little bit. She didn't stop putting those things into the story, but she tried to frame it as less bad. She wanted the audience to stop giving her grief. At least that's my headcanon, because there was a definite shift in the writing as time went on. The rest of the main six are supporting characters, and the Cutie Mark Crusaders, which are around 14 years old in this universe, have their own mini story arc. However, before we get into them, I want to take a moment to talk about Pinkie Pie. You see, she's mostly a comic relief character, but she got her own incomplete story set in high school. Pinkie Pie fucks everyone at school, including faculty. Once Discord, an older man, becomes the principal of the school, she sets her sights on him and manages to fuck him. Keep in mind that she is 16 through all of this. They wind up getting married and having kids in the future, but we don't see much of it due to the story being incomplete. However, she does wear a collar around her neck, signaling to others that Discord is her master or something, I don't know. Discord isn't her only intimate partner, however. Maud Pie, her older sister, is also intersex like Rainbow Dash. Maud was kicked out of their family home after their parents caught her, an adult, touching her 13-year-old sister. Pinkie Pie moved away after her parents started to beat her, and she visits her sister often to have sex. While we're talking about side stories, let's bring up Twicentia. Twicentia is a spin-off where Essentia and Twilight are in high school. They meet and fall in love, but have to deal with Twilight's mother not approving of their relationship very much. This leads to Twilight rebelling against her mother, wearing provocative clothing and being very much seductive. However, she goes too far in her being rebellious, and nearly rapes Fluttershy before Essentia can stop her. Besides that, this story isn't much of anything. Valentine's Day is forgettable and just weird. It's a Valentine's Day special. I don't even remember if there's a sex scene in it. And both Limit stories are so unfinished that I can't really comment on them. Those are just the stories in which Essentia kills herself. Now to the Cutie Mark Crusaders. Apple Bloom grapples with the fact that she is gay and likes both of her friends. The three end up in a polyamorous relationship, and they have a lot of sex scenes, all of which we have to see. Then we have Scootaloo, basically a normal kid who just wants to live a happy life with her two girlfriends. She's uncomfortable and cautious when she finds out Rainbow Dash is attracted to children, but she accepts it because she loves her. She ends up getting adopted by Rainbow Dash and Fluttershy, however, her custody gets given solely to Fluttershy after Rainbow Dash molests her. Scootaloo ends up forgiving her in the end, though. Then we have Sweetie Belle, probably the creepiest out of all the three, considering that she tries to tease and flirt with Rainbow Dash, knowing she's attracted to children. They almost have sex, but end up not doing so for plot reasons. When Rainbow Dash is first put into the asylum, Sweetie Belle comes to visit with Rarity and starts crying, admitting that she wants to Rainbow Dash right there in the hospital. She ends up getting over her crush on Rainbow Dash, though. She realizes that she was just projecting her attraction to her sister Rarity onto Rainbow Dash. Rarity finds out about Sweetie Belle's feelings for her, and they wind up having sisterly adult-on-child coitus off-screen. The other two characters of note are Spectrum and Sunrise. Sunrise is Twilight and Essentia's daughter. She's really protective of Essentia and has a big crush on her. May I remind you, Essentia is her mother. She's really protective of her because when she was a young kid, she accidentally read Twilight's diary in which she said she hated her wife and that she wanted to kill her and rape her and whatever. Not only that, but she was mostly raised by Essentia for many years because Twilight was in the mental hospital when she was a kid. This traumatized her, and she spent the rest of her life kind of resenting Twilight and growing an unhealthy attraction to her other mother. This leads to them having a scene where they touch each other, but also get into fights. She has a boyfriend named Spectrum, who's Fluttershy and Rainbow Dash's son. That's it, to be honest. Spectrum is, as stated before, Rainbow Dash and Fluttershy's son, and he has a huge crush on both of his mothers. His character arc is coming to terms with him being a trans girl, but the narration always refers to him as a he, so I guess I'll do the same. He experiments with this idea by cross-dressing and having sex with Sunrise. They are both 16. He winds up having a sexual relationship with both of his moms. That's also about it. Much of, if not all, of these characters' stories are incomplete because the fanfic was never finished. If any of this sounds rushed or confusing, imagine how I feel. Now we have the separate story in the same universe, that being the Dazzlings. Adagio is pretty old, starting at 38 and ending in her mid to late 40s to 50s. She's a very generous and seemingly kind woman who often tries to help those in need. She wants to run her own strip club but can't manage to get a loan. One day, she meets a distraught 15-year-old girl named Sonata at a bus stop. After buying her food and being nice to her, they become friends. Whilst being friends, Adagio saves her from being assaulted, buys her more food, drives her around, and flirts with her incessantly. Essentially, she's grooming her. Sonata's family is rich, and her father is the owner of a loaning company. After Sonata finds out about Adagio's dream of owning a club, she sneaks Adagio into her father's schedule to set up an appointment for a loan. This leads to the 38-year-old Adagio and the 15-year-old Sonata fall in love and become a couple secretly. They agree of having Sonata run away with her in the dead of night and live in the upstairs of the strip club. Essentially, Adagio kidnaps a little girl and keeps her hidden away for years. The entire time, Sonata refers to Adagio as Mommy. Adagio has trauma because she had a stillbirth and can't have children, even though she wants to be a mother. So she pretends that Sonata is her girlfriend/daughter. We'll get into the other characters later, but as time goes on, she manages to get 2 other girlfriends, and they all live with her and call her Mommy. Each are pretty young, but I think that those are barely legal instead of illegal. Adagio's story ends with her passing away in a car accident off-screen, and everyone who ever knew her becoming devastated. Now we have Sonata. Sonata is emotionally neglected by her parents and bullied at school. Bullied to the point where she is almost raped, which again, Adagio saves her from. Not only that, but she has an eating disorder. Needless to say, she is a very isolated and vulnerable teenager. Adagio is one of the few people to show her kindness, which is enough for her to fall in love with her and become endlessly devoted. Once again, Adagio groomed this girl and then kidnapped her. After many years of her disappearance, her parents finally find out where she is and try to form a relationship with her again, which eventually works. Honestly, her main point in the story is to be Adagio's favorite girlfriend and to be hopelessly devoted to her. After Adagio's passing, she's nearly always distraught, even seeing her ghost everywhere. One of her remaining girlfriends finds out that Adagio froze her placenta, and with the power of modern science, the doctors are able to inseminate Sonata, and she can become pregnant with Adagio's baby. The series ends before we can see anything of it, but I still find it highly disturbing. Aria is the second girlfriend who initially hates Adagio for being a cradle robber and actively calls her out, but Adagio manipulates and seduces Aria and they all eventually have and fall in love and whatever. There's also a mini story arc about Aria's parents not accepting her for who she is, and Adagio comes in and becomes the mother figure Aria never had. There's specifically a running theme of loved ones, specifically parents, disapproving of the relationship their daughters have with Adagio, but eventually Adagio comes up on top. Their parents either come to love Adagio as well, or are made out to be villains, killers, abusers, and get cut off from their children, once again isolating them to be only with Adagio. Besides those things, she's basically a nothing character. She just mopes around all day. Sunset Shimmer is the third girlfriend and is even less interesting than Aria. After Adagio's death, she becomes the new surrogate mother for the other two. She's also the bartender in the strip club. That's basically it. That's pretty much all of the characters involved and the best TLDR I can give you without just reading the thing to you. In the Google Drive provided in the description, I have not only all the stories for you to verify yourself, but a summary of every chapter of every book, in case you want a more in-depth look without just reading the entire thing. I think it's important that we talk about framing when it comes to storytelling. I noticed that Stockholm, the Razzle Dazzle, has a great parallel with the famous work by Vladimir Nabokov, or however you say it. I can't say the title of the book on YouTube, so you get a butchered name of the author. Here's a censored version of the cover. The similarities, but also its differences, are a good way of establishing why Stockholm is so awful. The other story is about a man named Humbert, a pedophile who becomes obsessed with a 12 to 14-year-old girl, depending on the adaptation, named Dolores. After the death of Dolores' mother, Humbert, who recently became her stepfather, steals her away to travel across the country and grooms her into a pedophile relationship. In the end, he dies. Stockholm, the Razzle Dazzle, is about Adagio Dazzle, a pedophile who becomes obsessed with a 15-year-old girl named Sonata. After Adagio grooms Sonata into a pedophilic relationship with her, Sonata ensures Adagio gets a loan for her club business from her rich father. After the funds are secure, Adagio kidnaps Sonata and they live in the upstairs of Adagio's club. During that time, Adagio becomes Sonata's wife and mother figure. In the end, Adagio dies. On the surface, they seem relatively the same with a few aesthetic differences, but it's in framing and execution where we see a clear difference in morals. Humbert is shown to be explicitly abusive to Dolores, hitting her multiple times, screaming at her when he suspects she's told someone about their relationship, and isolates her away from everyone else but him. She's expected to stay at home all the time, and the ideas such as hanging out with her friends or being part of something like a school play is justification for him to let out all of his aggression onto her. Never in the story are we meant to think that Dolores is sexually appealing. There are scenes in which she is seen as beautiful or cute, but all the sexual context comes from Humbert himself. Nothing about the story is sexy. No one is meant to look at the relationship between the two and see something as aspirational or even cute. Whenever Humbert isn't raping her, the relationship is seen as constantly stressful, hiding from the police, arguments between the two, or scenes in which the express point is to show the clear maturity and balance between the two. And let's talk about Humbert himself. In his best scenes, at least in terms of morality, Humbert is seen as a simple, relatively boring man. He mostly spends his time in his room writing or keeping to himself. Most of the time, we see him as a pathetic, sad sack creep. He's a loser, not a threat to anyone his age, and is easily overpowered mentally by anyone he comes across. And at absolute worst, he's seen as a paranoid, abusive predator, only interested in living out his sick fantasies with children. When we look at Stockholm, the framing is completely different. The relationship between Sonata and Adagio is seen as incredibly romantic. Adagio saves Sonata from being raped, feeding her when she's hungry, driving her to school, giving her attention her parents neglect to do, and is impossibly generous to the point of absurdism. Adagio is seen as almost a Jesus figure in the book. When she isn't pampering Sonata or her other partners to high heaven, she's housing the poor, beating up date rapists in her club, giving her employees personalized gifts and raises whenever she gets the chance to. Even her, as a lesbian, has sex with a man in order to get some money from him. She uses the money in order to give her employees huge Christmas bonuses. Nearly everyone she's ever met adores her. Once again, she's almost a goddess. Anyone who calls her out on kidnapping a little girl is either characterized as a villain or an abuser themselves. Or they end up falling in love with her. Or at the very least learn to accept Adagio as she is. And this was all intentional. Going back to the prior clip we watched, Lily goes out of her way to write Adagio like this.
If I can take this brutal sadist and write her as a loving matriarch that rivals Fluttershy when it comes to sincere kindness, I'm pretty sure you can make an alicorn.
But obviously, I think that the most egregious part is the sex scenes between Adagio and Sonata. Now, this is going to be a hot take, but I don't personally have an issue with fictional children being sexualized if it's framed properly and serves a purpose. Or at least a good purpose, because Lily very much has a goal in mind when writing these scenes. It's to get the reader to jerk off while reading it. All these moments are supposed to be hot, and something you'd be able to jerk off to. I don't think there was a single sex scene in this entire series that served any real narrative purpose, except for trying to get the reader off. At least in my opinion, there isn't anything wrong with writing a story about a pedophile, abusive relationship, dark themes, or anything taboo, really. But you can't sit there and actively condone those things. And you especially can't do so while calling people who do the same thing as you pedophiles. People who in real life want to f kids or have sex with their families. You can't sit there and lie about it. It's disgusting, disingenuous, and incredibly hypocritical. And generally speaking, hypocrisy is human. But Lily has a whole career about her media takes and her opinions. Consistency is important because you are selling your opinions. If your opinions or your credibility don't mean anything to you, why should anyone ever listen to you, pay you money, watch your videos, etc.? Look, if you don't want to stop watching Lily because of Stockholm, fine. You probably weren't going to change your mind watching this. Hell, you're probably not this far in the video. But you cannot use her as some kind of moral authority or pretend that anything she says has merit. To close off this section of the video, I'll reiterate the main point. It isn't the fact that Lily wrote a story about an abusive relationship. It's the fact that the abusive people in question are the heroes of the story, and that she thinks that we should approve of it. I apologize for putting this point kind of randomly in the middle of the video, but I want to do a bit of debunking before we continue. Firstly, Lily was not a minor when she was writing this story. Many people are confusing Stockholm with another story she wrote called Animal Magnetism. A story lost to time, but it was a Pokephilia fanfiction she wrote when she was 15 years old. She claims that she was 16 to 17, but actually doing the math of when it was released at how old she is now, she was 15. It was allegedly a story about a man named Kevin's romantic and intimate relationship with a Gardevoir. Lily has admitted to writing this multiple times.
When are you going to finally own up to animal magnetism?
Cough. I was 13. What the fuck am I owning up to? Being a weird kid. I think 8 years is long enough to not have to address ancient internet bullshit. And even if you don't agree with that, which most of the time I find understandable, I think we can all agree that 16 to 17 years is certainly long enough. You all are really desperate, aren't you?
What the f is animal magnetism?
Something stupid I wrote 16 years ago when I was in the hospital with nothing else to do.
I cannot comment on the fic because I haven't read it, but if what is said is true, it may show a pattern of behavior. But anyway, Stockholm was released on February 26, 2014, meaning she would have been 21 when she released it. She did not stop talking about and promoting Stockholm until at least August 9th, 2017. And that's the most recent date I could find. There could be even more deleted posts where she talked about it even more recently. Meaning, she did not stop peddling Stockholm to her audience and fully erase it until she was at least 25 years old. Do not let anyone tell you that this is a decade old and that she was a dumb kid when she did this. She was well past the age to understand why this is messed up. The second thing I want to debunk, or at least discuss, is the idea that Lily deleted the fic because she is ashamed of it. I disagree. I disagree because this is not how someone who is genuinely remorseful acts. A 25-year-old doesn't start deleting everything without explanation and expects you to forget. You can look back to her most recent post about this. Lily is 30 and still lying about this. She's gone as far as to say that Josh Scorcher, a former friend of hers, spread around just to slander her.
He seems to think that this will not be fought, that he can file a defamation suit and immediately win. But the reality is that this will most definitely be fought, especially since Josh has actually tried to defame me numerous times, going as far as to distribute on Twitter that he grabbed from likely any random story off Fanfiction and claiming Lily made that, trust me.
Not only that, but once again, she's claimed that people forge documents in order to make her look bad.
They have spent years trying and failing to make everything under the sun stick. They've gone as far as to forge entire documents and put my name on them to poison the well when I talked about the brony fandom being a hive of disgusting freak shows.
You know, it'd be one thing if she simply deleted everything and forgot about it. If she just pretended it never happened and actually ignored it because people were calling her out. But no. She's actively messed with and lied about people because she needs everyone to believe that she's morally correct. If she would have properly addressed it, apologized, stopped calling people p***s for writing the same shit she did, no one would care. Or at least most people wouldn't. But she didn't. She doubled and tripled down and pretended like it never happened. Something she's admitted to doing in the past.
Welcome to the Bi Club, Lily. Congrats.
Welcome back, more like. Let's hope I don't get harassed into pretending this never happened a fourth time.
And lastly, while writing the script for this video, Lily changed her tune just a wee bit. In a visual gag, she said, "I didn't write Stockholm," and that the people talking about it just want her to kill herself. Obviously, I do not want Lily to kill herself. Let's just go on to the next point. Now, I've touched about this before in the framing section of the video, but I want to talk about how Lily feels about problematic content in the modern day. Lily has made it very clear, on both social media and in her videos, that she thinks that fiction affects reality and that people who consume problematic content, i.e. underage characters having sex, incest, etc., want to do those things in real life. In this post, when asked why she calls people into fictional children and it isn't illegal, Lily explains how it doesn't matter if something is illegal, but immoral, going as far to say, you would not be seeking this material out for your own personal use if you didn't already want to fuck kids. There's a reason you like this material. It's because you're aroused by children.
Why do you continue to call people when drawings aren't illegal?
It does not actually mean you've committed a crime, not yet at least, but rather that you are someone who is sexually aroused by children. You may not be doing anything illegal, but you're still a gross and dangerous and that's exactly what I'm going to tell people. That's the great thing about the court of public opinion. What's legal and illegal is irrelevant. For the same reason we rage against corporations. It's not illegal to pay people bare bones wages, but we're going to bury you in negative PR for it regardless. It might not be illegal to draw underage children in situations, unless you live literally anywhere but the US. But if you think that's such a clever comeback, I dare you to say it in a job interview. You may not have committed a crime, technically, but you have broadcast that it would be extremely unwise to leave you unattended with children, and your opinions on what constitutes harmful material is entirely based on what you personally like. Here's a reality for you. You would not be seeking this material out for your own personal pleasure if you didn't already want to. Kids, the one thing you're right about is that drawings won't turn people into pedophiles, but that's because only pedophiles are interested in it to begin with. Miss me with that it's not harmful shit. Psychologists who study deranged and dangerous cretins like you have all said that violent porn harms the psyche of an individual and their perceptions of the people it portrays. So I'm going to trust the psychologists over a greasy, defensive pedophile lashing out in anger. There's a reason you like this material. It's because you're raised by children. Get therapy.
When someone said they thought that child pornography and fictional art of children aren't the same thing, Lily says that there is no difference between fictional content involving children and real-life content involving children.
Okay, but was this of real kids of fictional art?
Distinction without a difference.
Here Lily reiterates that anyone who consumes fictional content involving children or family members in a sexual setting are pedophiles or incestuous, and that they would fuck real children or their family if they could.
I know this is splitting hairs, but I'm curious. What are your opinions of people who consume problematic materials, like SP ships, for example, but does not, in real life, engage in the acts the media they consume depicts?
In the case of incest, were the laws different in some way, they would absolutely be doing it. Same goes for pedophiles, except they're already breaking the law by consuming the material. Even outside that paradigm, they're still on by that material. They're still actively seeking it out. Pedophilia doesn't mean you've committed a crime. Not yet, at least. It means you're on by children. Tell yourself whatever lies you wish, but the reality is if you consume pedophilic content you are a pedophile. Likewise with incest. We just don't have a fancy technical term for that. It's pretty much a distinction without a difference. They're disgusting people no matter what particular law they're breaking. The non-offender is in therapy, not on a message board.
This also very direct post straight up says whether it's illegal or not, or cartoons are real, is irrelevant. If you are someone who enjoys consuming sexualized images of children, be they real or fake, you are a pedophile. End of discussion.
Lolly is not illegal.
Neither is being a pedophile. You guys know that, right? Sexually affecting children is illegal. Possession, distribution of child pornography is illegal. Existing as somebody who wants to do either of those things is not illegal. Pedophilia does not actually mean you've committed a crime. Not yet, at least. It's not a criminal term like felon. It's a comment on your mental health. Whether or not it's legal or cartoons aren't real is irrelevant. If you are somebody who enjoys consuming sexualized images of children, be they real or fake, you are a pedophile. End of discussion.
Here's her very recently calling someone who is attracted to an underage character a pedophile.
Fictional children aren't real children. They are fictional. You could do what you want with them. It doesn't really matter.
You are a real pedophile.
And in this post, she talks about how she believes that you can't separate art from the person who made it, and that whatever you write says something about you.
I'm 15 and all my main characters are pretty much me. Should I do something about that? I don't want to be a bad writer, but I'm not sure how to not add my own beliefs, quirks, and general traits into a character. What can I do to fix this?
You can't. Every character, from protagonist to villain, is going to carry a small piece of yourself. The protagonists are going to represent traits and values you consider heroic. The villains will influenced by what you consider to be villainous. The themes are what you consider important to talk about. The relationship models you use are the ones you consider healthy and interesting. It's impossible to separate that from yourself from that. You cannot separate the artist from the art. It is impossible. I can't separate myself from Maliana. She's an amalgamation of physical and personality traits that I associate with heroism. The same goes with the way I write Kylo Ren. He is given the physical and personality traits that I associate with villainy. Every character has a little bit of you in it because they are in influenced by the things you think and believe.
She brings up the subject again when referring to Dragon Maid, an anime notorious for its lolly content, going as far as to say that the fictional drawings the creator made involving minors is pornography. In fact, she has multiple videos talking about how sexual fanfictions involving children is pornography, that fiction affects reality, and that the content you make and consume says something about you.
And whenever I talk about these things, there is always some kind of package dismissal from the people who don't want others to have these discussions. Namely, that worrying about this kind of thing is pointless because it's all fiction and fiction doesn't affect the real world. Of course, those of you who know what art is probably laughed when I said that. It's been a common thread among a great deal of fandom culture, but shippers in particular, to decry criticism of things like toxic pairings by claiming that fiction doesn't affect reality, that it's all harmless, and just because you like something in fiction doesn't reflect your views in reality, a sentiment that is as passionately stated as it is nonsense. Art has always influenced the real world because artists go out of their way to influence people. Nothing is ever just fiction, everything inspires something, even if it wasn't intended. The notion that fiction and reality are completely 100% separate from one another is so laughably boneheaded that it would almost be funny if it weren't for the fact that this isn't idiocy that causes this argument, it's delusion. And now we circle back to shipping, which is probably the worst for this particular defensive habit because it causes people to find ways to excuse things that should be objectively bad. Abuse, pedophilia, unhealthy power dynamics, all things that are normalized in fandoms. Let's rip the bandage off right now. The reason people get so defensive and try to make so many excuses is because they don't want to admit that there is a problem within their own brain. This doesn't just apply to of ships that straight women fawn over. It applies to every gross ship dynamic, adults and children, use of power. These are all things that will say something about you if you passionately and consistently ship this kind of garbage. Your interests, your likes and dislikes, how you act on those likes and dislikes, these are all things that say things about you.
Looking at all this, you have to wonder if Lily actually believes this, or is trying to compensate for her actual feelings on the matter. She's really hard on pedophiles of any kind, making it a point to add it on her Twitter bio at one time. It kind of gives off this vibe that anti-gay politicians have, where in public they'll rally against gay people, but in private they're sucking cock. I'm not saying that she's hurt kids or consumed real-life child pornography, FYI. You get my meaning. It's just really try-hard and weird. Considering the fact that she's been accused multiple times of having her partners draw things that made them uncomfortable, including animals and rape, my benefit of doubt starts to weaken. If you see no problem with Lily writing these things, good for you. I think you're weird. But you have to admit, she is a massive hypocrite. And by the logic of a lot of these pro-shippers and lollings, actively slandering and defaming those who consume this content, either being extremely ignorant or straight up falsely accusing people of being pedophiles to get brownie points with her viewers. By her logic, even if she doesn't actually believe it, has accidentally called herself a pedophile who is attracted to real-life children. And for legal reasons, I need to make it clear that I am not making an accusation that she is a pedophile, has hurt kids, or wants to hurt kids. I am saying that she is unintentionally saying she does, either from guilt and repentance, or just being really stupid, or twisted in her own lies. Who's to say? This all seems like a lot, doesn't it? I mean, I could show you more quotes from the stories all day. I can tell you what happens. I can make a 10-hour video about all the scenes of the story that disturbed me. But I don't really think it would get the point across. This video is a TLDR. For those people, most people, who aren't ever going to actually read this horrible thing. And you know, unlike Lily, I don't believe it's the best idea for you to take my word for it. I implore you to do your own research, to read the story if you have the stomach, to look at the Google Drive, which I've spent a really long time trying to make easily accessible and easy to read, to seek out the actual truth of the situation for yourself. But I know the vast majority of you aren't going to read something almost 1 million words long, something so disturbing, written by someone you may care about. So, I made this video for those who can't or won't look into this as deeply as I did. to be able to share and inform others. In order for this to not be buried in the sea of petty, stupid Lily drama, I have yet to see anyone really explore this topic in any depth, so someone had to do it. Unfortunately, that person had to be me. Once again, in the description, there is a summary of every chapter from every book in the series. Instead of reading 1,000 pages, you can just read 100, or don't. I don't care anymore. This video has been exhausting. Anyways, I hope you're doing well. I really hope you share this video to as many people as possible, and I hope I never have to think about Rainbow Dash's penis again. Goodbye, everybody.
If you know something is bad, and you're not saying anything, you might as well be saying the bad stuff. If you're not speaking, you are implicitly supporting the status quo.